The event and the extent, really, of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein shows a mix of poor judgment and dishonesty.
Prince Andrew's team tried to hire internet trolls to hassle his accuser. I mean, that is all.
Prince Andrew's downfall came because of his close links and ties to Jeffrey Epstein.
Andrew's finally talking, and out in California, Meghan's panicking. Look, his downfall wasn't quiet. It was brutal, public, and everyone watched it happen. The Epstein connection took him down overnight. But here's what doesn't add up. If Andrew's life fell apart for being in those circles, why has there been complete radio silence about Meghan's time in that exact same scene? Same people, same timeline, same yachts, yet one royal's life imploded while the other one's in Montecito, telling her story on Netflix. Andrew's aware of the names, he's aware of the dates, and most importantly, he's aware of exactly who else was there. Word on the street is he's done protecting someone who turned her back on him the second things got rough. And what he's about to say, it's going to flip everything you thought about how Meghan really got into that family. Before we get into this, what you're about to hear involves yacht parties, a mysterious handler, and connections that go way deeper than anyone's talking about. If you don't want to miss this kind of stuff, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. And if you're already hooked, drop a like. Now let's dive in. Here's where things get interesting. Let's talk about Karina Shuliak. She was Epstein's last girlfriend, and she wasn't flying Southwest to get around. This woman only traveled on his private jets and yachts, moving through this exclusive world that most people will never even get close to. We're talking about a lifestyle where everything's private, everything's curated, and everyone recognizes everyone else. It's not the kind of crowd you just stumble into by accident. Now, get this. Back in 2014, photos surfaced showing Meghan on yachts in this exact scene. Not a similar scene, not one that kind of overlaps, the exact one. Identical crowd, identical people, identical lifestyle. And we're not talking about one photo from some charity event where 100 people were invited. We're talking about intimate gatherings on private yachts where the guest list is extremely selective. You don't end up in those photos unless you're part of that world. Think about what that means for a second. Andrew's entire life imploded because of his connection to Epstein in that scene. He lost his titles, his reputation got destroyed, and he basically became persona non grata in his own family. The association alone was enough to end his public life. But when it comes to Meghan being photographed in the very same crowd, moving through that lifestyle during the same time frame, cricket sounds, nothing. Not a single headline asking questions, not a single investigation, not even a raised eyebrow from the media that usually dissects every single thing she does. And here's what really stands out. Virginia Roberts was familiar with Meghan from back in those days.
Would Meghan Markle be called by Virginia Roberts to testify in a case that had nothing?
This wasn't some passing acquaintance where they maybe met once at a crowded party and took a group photo. They were connected. Roberts changed everything for Andrew, and she had personal history with Meghan from that era. Let that sink in for a minute. The woman who had enough information to end a prince's public life also had personal knowledge of Meghan from those circles. But you won't hear about this connection anywhere in the mainstream coverage of the royal family. It's like it doesn't exist. The same outlets that will spend 3 days analyzing what Meghan wore to a coffee run somehow have zero interest in her documented presence in this world. The same journalists who turned Andrew's life into a nonstop headline factory have nothing to say about photos from the identical scene featuring the Duchess of Sussex. The palace has stayed completely mum about all of this, and it's not because they don't know. Trust me, they're aware. The royal family has one of the most sophisticated intelligence and background checking systems in the world. You don't marry into that family without them understanding where you've been and who you've been with. They were informed before Harry was. They're protecting themselves. Because if they start talking about who is in those groups and when, if they start pulling that thread, it opens up a whole can of worms they're not ready to deal with. So instead, total quiet. No comments, no investigations, no questions asked, just a wall of protection around the institution, even if it means leaving some pretty big questions unanswered. They'd rather let sleeping dogs lie than risk the fallout of admitting that someone from Epstein's scene made it all the way to the front row of the balcony at Buckingham Palace. Because that would mean acknowledging that their vetting process failed, or worse, that they knew and let it happen anyway. And neither of those options is something they're willing to put on the table. So the quiet continues, and Meghan's past stays buried while Andrew's gets paraded through every newspaper in the world. If you want to understand how someone goes from a cable TV actress in Toronto to marrying into the British royal family, you need to know about Marcus Anderson. This guy's the ghost in the machine, the ultimate connector. As the global consultant for Soho House, Anderson basically became the king of the in crowd. But according to what's being said now, he was way more than just Meghan's friend. He was her access point into a lifestyle she couldn't have reached on her own. The story starts back in 2011. That's when Soho House opened its doors in Toronto, and Anderson was right there running the show. Word is he brought Meghan into the scene almost immediately. Now, Soho House isn't just some fancy restaurant with a membership card. It's where the elite go to connect without feeling like they're networking. It's designed to feel exclusive, intimate.
Because there is no good time to talk about Mr. Epstein. And
like you're part of something special. And Anderson's job? Get interesting people into high society to make the clubs feel even more exclusive. He wasn't just letting anyone in, he was curating. And Meghan, she was one of his picks. Anderson introduced her to the real power players. We're not talking about other actors or TV producers. We're talking billionaires. We're talking people who move in spaces most of us will never see. And eventually, royalty. Through Anderson, Meghan was suddenly showing up at parties in New York, London, Istanbul, places where the guest list reads like a Forbes 500 report. This wasn't about building an acting career anymore. This was about building a completely different kind of resume. Here's the part that matters. This crowd Anderson built around Meghan overlapped directly with Andrew's scene. These weren't parallel worlds that occasionally crossed paths. They were the same parties, the same clubs, the same people. Anderson was moving Meghan through spaces where Andrew was already a regular. And this was years before anyone had heard about her and Harry. Years before that Instagram story everyone loves to repeat. Because that's the official version, right? Harry saw her on Instagram, fell in love, and the rest is history. It's romantic, it's modern, it's perfect for the fairy tale narrative. But Andrew's saying something completely different now. He's saying she was already in that world, long before Harry ever entered the picture. She wasn't discovered by chance on social media. She was already there, already connected, already moving through the same spaces the royals occupied. Anderson holds the blueprint for all of this. He knows exactly who he introduced her to and when. He knows which parties, which trips, which connections mattered most. And if Andrew starts talking and decides to bring Anderson's role into the conversation, that whole Instagram love story starts looking a lot less spontaneous and a lot more calculated. Because Anderson wasn't just helping a friend meet people. According to what's coming out now, he was building her presence in that scene very specifically at the highest levels of society. Think about what that means. the entire narrative we've been sold about how Meghan entered the royal family relies on the idea that it was accidental, organic, meant to be. But if Anderson was systematically introducing her to this lifestyle years in advance, if he was the architect of her entire rise through high society, then nothing about this story happened by chance. And that's the kind of information that changes everything. Because it's one thing to marry into royalty through luck and love. It's another thing entirely if you were placed there by someone who knew exactly what he was doing. And right now, with Andrew backed into a corner and ready to talk, Anderson's carefully constructed blueprint might be about to get dragged into the spotlight, whether he likes it or not.
Head of steam, and quite frankly, what they would have done was sought legal advice. The legal advisors would have gone to the Duke of York to get cast-iron guarantee.
Here's what most people completely missed. The York group knew Meghan first. Before Harry, before the engagement, before any of the headlines, Meghan was already moving through Andrew's crowd. And that's not speculation. That's what's being said by those close to the household. Andrew's group had everything someone like Meghan would want: wealth, massive estates, a high-profile lifestyle that opened every door. It was the kind of access most individuals spend their entire lives trying to get. But there was one person who saw exactly what was happening, and that was Sarah Ferguson. Now, Fergie's been through it all. She married into the royal household. She got divorced. She faced her own scandals, and she came out the other side with a perspective most don't have. Even though she and Andrew have been divorced for decades, they're famously close. They share a home, they share a life, and most importantly, they share information. Fergie knows how the royal game works, and she knows how to spot someone who's playing it. And when Meghan started appearing in their scene, Fergie picked up on what was happening. She wasn't naive about it. She saw someone who was ambitious, connected, and clearly comfortable in their lifestyle. Now, there's nothing wrong with ambition, but Fergie's protective of their setup. She and Andrew have built this unusual but functional life together, and she wasn't comfortable with how things were developing. She kept their group tight and didn't let new faces get too close to their inner orbit. It wasn't personal, it was protective. Here's what Fergie reportedly said to those close to her at the time. She sensed Meghan would cause chaos, not in a dramatic, explosive way necessarily, but in the kind of way that disrupts everything quietly and permanently. Fergie's been around long enough to recognize the signs. She's seen individuals come into the royal orbit promising modernization and fresh perspectives, only to leave destruction in their wake. And her instinct was telling her this wouldn't end well for anyone involved. So what happened? After it became clear the York scene wasn't going to open up the way Meghan might have hoped, things shifted toward Harry. And here's what makes this whole story so much more complicated. Harry had absolutely no idea about any of this background. He didn't know Meghan had already been moving through his uncle's crowd. He didn't know Fergie had reservations. He didn't know there was this whole backstory that predated their Instagram connection by years. To Harry, this was a fresh start. A beautiful American actress who seemed to understand him in a way no one else did. Someone who made him feel protected and seen. He fell hard and he fell fast. But while he was falling in love, there were relatives watching it happen and thinking, we've seen this before. We know how this goes. And they tried to warn him. Those warnings before the wedding that everyone said were about racism or snobbery.
A shocking handwritten letter he sent directly to Prince Harry. This is the biggest mistake in royal wedding history.
According to what's coming out now, they were about her past with the York circles. They were about the fact that Meghan's path into the royal scene wasn't as simple or as recent as Harry believed. But he didn't listen. He couldn't hear it. When you're in love, especially when you feel like you finally found someone who gets you, after years of feeling misunderstood, you don't want to hear that there might be complications. You don't want to believe that the person you're building your life with has a background your kin already know about. And so Harry pushed forward, cut ties with those trying to warn him, and married Meghan anyway. and Fergie? She watched it all happen, knowing exactly where it came from and probably having a pretty good idea of where it would end up. For years, Harry's been his wife's biggest defender, against the press, against his own family, against pretty much anyone who questioned the marriage. He gave up his military titles, his home country, his bond with his brother, all to protect Meghan from what he saw as unfair treatment. In his mind, he was doing the right thing. He was standing by his wife against a system that didn't understand her and a media that wouldn't leave her alone. It was him and Meghan against the world, and he was all in. But word from California is that the honeymoon phase in Montecito has turned into something much darker. That dream life they built, the one with the mansion and the Netflix deals and the freedom from royal protocol, it's not playing out the way Harry thought it would. Because here's the thing about running away from your problems. Eventually you realize you brought some of them with you. And some of the biggest ones aren't the ones you left behind. They're the ones you're living with. Those concerns his kin tried to share before the wedding, the ones he dismissed as jealousy or snobbery or racism, they finally landed. And according to what's being said by sources close to the situation, Harry's been confronted with details about Meghan's past ties to his own uncle. Not just whispers or secondhand stories, but real facts about her time in those circles before she ever met him. Think about what that does to someone. Think about discovering that the woman you gave up everything for, the woman you defended against your own brother, had a whole life in your uncle's scene that you never understood. Andrew's the family embarrassment, the one nobody wants to talk about, the one whose situation has overshadowed everything else for years. And now Harry's learning that Meghan knew Andrew, moved in his crowd, was part of that whole world before their story even began. It's one thing to have differences with your spouse about how to handle the media or whether to attend family events. It's another thing entirely to discover that your wife's background intersects with your family's biggest scandal in ways you never imagined. Sources say Harry's crushed, like genuinely devastated by what he's learning.
Right.
To the cut.
You mean Harry's book that's coming?
Harry's book, the biography. I mean, that's going to be devastating for the royal family.
The man who left everything behind, who severed links with the institution and the people he was born into, is now sitting in California, realizing he might have destroyed everything for someone whose past is way more complicated than he ever understood. And here's what makes it even worse. He can barely be in the same room with her. That's what's being reported by those who claim to be close to the situation. The love story that was supposed to be their happy ending has turned into something neither of them knows how to navigate. He's stuck now, stuck in California, separated from his support system, separated from those closest who tried to warn him, separated from the country that used to be his home, and he's finally accepting what he might have thrown away. His bond with William, his military career, his role in the institution, all of it gone for a connection that's now falling apart under the weight of reality he should have known from the beginning. The irony is brutal. Harry spent years saying his family didn't understand Meghan, that they judged her unfairly, that they couldn't see who she really was. But now it's looking like maybe they saw exactly who she was, and they tried to tell him and he just couldn't hear it. And the worst part? There's no easy way out. He's burned too many bridges to go back. He's said too much, done too much, cut off too many people. So even if everything he's learning now is true, even if all their advice was valid, he's trapped in the life he chose. And that might be the saddest part of this whole story. Sometimes the person trying to save you isn't the one holding your hand. Sometimes it's the one you pushed away. You're probably sitting there wondering, if all this is true, why hasn't the institution done anything about it? Why haven't they released whatever they have? Why are they just letting this play out in California while Harry spirals and Meghan continues telling her version of events to anyone with a camera? It's a fair question, and the answer is more complicated than you might think. The household is sitting on a mountain of details that could end Meghan's public life tomorrow. We're talking about background checks, interviews, reports from before the wedding that nobody's ever seen, the kind of facts that would completely reshape how the public sees her. And they've had this stuff for years. It's not like they just found out about any of this. The royal household has one of the most sophisticated vetting systems in the world. You don't marry a prince without them knowing everything about you going back to childhood. They knew who Meghan was, where she'd been, and who she'd been with long before Harry proposed. So why the silence? Here's the catch. Bringing up Meghan's history with the Epstein-Andrew crowd reopens wounds that King Charles has been trying to heal. Think about it from his perspective. He just became king. His entire reign so far has been about trying to modernize the monarchy, slim it down.
About the man, but also about money and his madnesses and also the goodnesses about and all the rest of it.
Make it relevant for a new generation. The last thing he wants is for his brother's situation to dominate the headlines again. Every time Andrew's name comes up, it reminds everyone of the biggest scandal the family's faced in decades. And if they start talking about Meghan's connections to that world, if they admit that someone from those circles made it all the way onto the balcony at Buckingham Palace, it makes the entire institution look incompetent. Or worse, that they knew and let it happen. It raises concerns nobody wants to answer. How did this happen? Who knew what and when? Why didn't anyone stop it? These aren't just uncomfortable issues. These are the kind of concerns that undermine the legitimacy of the whole system. The firm is trapped. They genuinely want distance from this situation. They want the Harry and Meghan circus to end so they can move forward without the constant drama and media attention. But they can't make a move without the splashback hitting Charles and William. Every piece of what they know about Meghan's past potentially drags Andrew back into the headlines. And if Andrew's back in the public eye, Charles looks weak for not handling his brother more firmly. William looks compromised because he'll have to answer problems about what he knew and when. The whole careful image they've been building falls apart. They're not staying quiet because they love Meghan. There's no love lost there. The palace would be thrilled if she just faded away and stopped doing interviews. But they're terrified of what happens when the first domino falls. Because once you start pulling on this thread, where does it stop? Do they have to address why their vetting process failed? Do they have to explain why Harry was allowed to marry someone with these connections, despite warnings from inside the family? Do they have to acknowledge that maybe the concerns people had weren't about race or modernization, but about real questions regarding her background? So instead of acting, they're holding back, staying patient for the perfect moment when they can release what they have without causing massive damage to the institution. Not acting until a time when the attention's on someone else so they can quietly share details without it becoming the biggest story in the world. Or maybe they're hoping Andrew will do it for them. If Andrew talks, if he's the one who brings all this into the open, the family can claim they had nothing to do with it. They can act shocked, pretend they didn't realize the full picture, and avoid taking responsibility for their own silence. It's a strategy, just not a particularly brave one. And in the meantime, Harry's life falls apart in California while the institution that could have prevented all of this just watches and waits. Before she was a duchess, before the royal wedding, before any of this became international news, Meghan was just the girl in Toronto building her social life.
It was very early on in their relationship when Harry is bowled over by Meghan, is desperately in love, and already is talking about...
And to most watching, she was doing exactly what you'd expect from an actress on a cable show. Working hard on set, going to events, networking in the industry. The hardworking actress on Suits, living the dream, making it happen in Hollywood North. That's the story everyone saw and accepted. But word from the street tells a completely different story about her lifestyle during that period. Because while Suits was filming Monday through Friday, Meghan's weekends were spent somewhere else entirely. She wasn't staying in the city going to local restaurants and hanging out with her castmates. She was on planes, flying to New York, flying to London, moving through some of the most exclusive clubs in the world, the kind of places where you can't just buy your way in, no matter how much money you have. And that's where Jessica Mulroney comes into the picture. Mulroney was already plugged into the city's high society scene, married into a prominent family, tied to everyone who mattered in Canadian social spheres. Through Mulroney, Meghan got introduced to a crowd most working actresses never get near. This wasn't industry networking. This wasn't about landing better roles or meeting casting directors. This was about access to wealth and influence on a completely different level. Here's what individuals who knew her during that time say. She moved through relationships quickly. You'd see her with someone at events for a few months. They'd be inseparable, posting photos together, attending everything as a pair, and then suddenly, nothing. The friendship would just end. No drama, no public falling out, just a quiet fade where that person was no longer in the picture and someone new appeared in their place. It was a pattern that repeated itself over and over during that era. And those weekend trips, they weren't random getaways. She was moving through the same clubs where Andrew was a regular. These weren't coincidental overlaps. These were the exact same venues, the exact same parties, the exact same social ecosystem. While everyone back in Canada thought she was just enjoying her success and treating herself to nice vacations, she was building something else entirely. A presence in scenes that had nothing to do with acting and everything to do with proximity to power and wealth. Her friendship with Eugenie and Fergie during this chapter is particularly interesting because that's not the kind of link you make by accident. You don't just randomly become friends with members of the British royal family while you're filming a cable show in Canada. That takes cultivation. That takes being in the right places at the right times with the right individuals. And according to what's being said now, that's exactly what was happening. Meghan was building ties far beyond the entertainment industry, getting closer to the Windsor world, step by step, relationship by relationship. The whole Toronto chapter of her life looks different now when you understand what was happening behind the scenes. It wasn't just an actress enjoying her success. It was someone systematically building a completely
thrilled about getting the cover of a few years ago when she got engaged to Harry, which went down very badly with the palace at the time, I can tell you.
different kind of resume. Moving through friendships quickly, letting ties fade when she was done, spending weekends in New York and London instead of building genuine relationships in the city where she actually lived and worked, and all of it leading to the network that would eventually put her in the same orbit as Harry. But here's what makes all of this relevant now. Those she dropped, the ones she used and moved past during those Toronto days, a lot of them are still around. They remember. They watched what happened. They saw the pattern. And now that everything's falling apart in Montecito, now that Andrew's talking and Harry's questioning everything, some of those individuals might be ready to fill in the blanks about who Meghan really was during that time before she became the Duchess. Everyone thought they knew. In the elite world, there's one unwritten rule that everyone understands. You never burn someone who has information about your past. It doesn't matter how successful you become, how far you rise, or how untouchable you think you are. The individuals who saw you on the way up, the ones who witnessed things, who were there for the parts of your story you'd rather forget, those are the ones you keep close. Or at minimum, you don't make them your enemy. It's basic survival strategy for anyone operating at that level. But Meghan broke that rule. And she didn't just break it quietly. She did it in the most public way possible by turning her back on the Yorks at their lowest moment. Here's what happened. When Andrew lost his titles and the household pushed them to the edges of royal life, when things got too messy and complicated for most to want to associate with them, Sarah Ferguson reached out. This wasn't a casual call. This was Fergie asking for help at a time when she and Andrew desperately needed support from someone with a platform. She was hoping that Meghan and Harry would use their massive media presence, their Netflix deals, their interviews, their celebrity status in America to help the Yorks find some support, or at least to show some allegiance to relatives who were going through their own public nightmare. It was a favor for a favor situation. The Yorks had been part of Meghan's path into the royal scene. They'd seen her before Harry, and now they needed someone to stand with them when everyone else was walking away. Meghan's response? Total silence, not even the courtesy of a phone call to explain why she couldn't help or didn't want to get involved. She just cut them off. And this wasn't an isolated incident. It's the same pattern she used with her own father, with her former friends, with anyone who became inconvenient or potentially problematic. Once someone stops being useful to the story she's telling, they get discarded. No sentimentality, no faithfulness, just a clean cut and move on. But here's where she miscalculated. Andrew and Fergie aren't just former friends or distant acquaintances she can ghost without consequences.
Okay, to repair royal relationships, but under certain conditions. Talk to us about this, Andrew. What's being said?
They're the keepers of the vault. They understand exactly who Meghan was before the veils and tiaras. They were there. They witnessed her moving through their circles. They're aware of the timeline, the ties, the real story of how she ended up in the institution. And they kept quiet about it for years, partly out of support for the household, partly because there was no reason to cause problems. But now Andrew's not protected by the relatives anymore. His titles are gone, his reputation is in ruins, his future in public life is non-existent. He's got nothing to lose by talking. And after being treated like he doesn't matter by someone who used his life as a stepping stone, he doesn't feel the need to protect her anymore either. The support is gone. The reasons to stay silent have evaporated. And someone with nothing to lose and no reason to keep your secrets is the most dangerous individual you can have in your life. Fergie's position is equally important here. She's been around the royal circus long enough to grasp exactly how the game works. She's aware of what information matters and what doesn't. She understands which stories would embarrass the institution and which would just hurt individuals. And right now, watching Meghan play the victim on international television while refusing to acknowledge the relatives who actually saw her first, Fergie's got every reason to back Andrew if he decides to talk. They're a unit, those two. They protect each other. And if Andrew's ready to go public with what he's familiar with, you can bet Fergie's not going to stop him. The mistake wasn't just tactical, it was the worst decision she could have made. Meghan burned the one bridge she absolutely needed to keep intact, and now that bridge is about to burn her back. So here we are. Andrew's tucked away at Royal Lodge, watching the news from California, seeing Meghan and Harry's life play out in real time while his own life sits in ruins. He's a man with no future in public life, no titles left to lose, no reputation to protect. And that's what makes this moment so dangerous. Because a person with nothing left to lose is the most unpredictable force you can have in any situation. They've got no reason to play nice, no reason to follow the unspoken rules, no reason to protect anyone but themselves. And he's making it clear to his inner circle that he's exhausted. Done with the double standards, done watching his life get destroyed while someone else from those same circles gets to reinvent herself as a victim on Netflix. Exhausted from being the family scandal while Meghan gets multi-million-dollar streaming deals to tell her side of things. The frustration isn't hidden anymore. He's finished being the only one who paid the price for ties they both had. Here's what's swirling to the surface right now. The secrets about the yachts. The truth about how Soho House and Marcus Anderson operated as the bridge into elite society. the real account of how Meghan got close to the Windsor world.
As refusing to look or comment or report on Meghan Markle's links to the same individual.
Not through a random Instagram post, but through years of cultivation and relationship building in circles he knew intimately. All of it's been sitting there, quiet, waiting for someone brave enough or angry enough to bring it into the light, and that someone might be Andrew. Meghan's watching the clock in Montecito. She knows what he's capable of saying. She understands what he witnessed. She's aware that if he decides to talk, really talk, the carefully constructed narrative she's built over the last few years falls apart instantly. Because you can spin a lot of things, you can reframe relationships, recontextualize decisions, explain away controversies, but you can't explain away being in the same rooms, at the same parties, in the same network, as someone whose life got destroyed for exactly those links. And the timing makes everything worse. Harry's already questioning everything. The marriage is reportedly strained beyond recognition. The public's interest in their tale is fading. And now this. The threat of him going public with information that would force everyone to re-examine how she really entered the palace. It's not just one problem, it's multiple crises converging at the worst possible moment. The fairy tale's over. That much is obvious to anyone paying attention. The happy ending they promised, the freedom and authenticity they said they'd find in California, the fresh start away from the institution, none of it materialized the way they thought it would. Instead, they're isolated, reportedly unhappy, dealing with the exact kind of drama they left England to escape. Except now they don't have the family support system, they don't have the institutional protection, and they don't have the benefit of distance from their own choices. The masks are slipping. Meghan's carefully curated image as the wrong duchess, the woman who just wanted to modernize the monarchy and got pushed out for it. That's getting harder to maintain when people from her past start talking. When the Toronto ties speak up, when the Soho House network gets examined more closely, when Andrew decides he's done protecting someone who abandoned him when things got difficult. Each crack in the narrative reveals something else underneath, and what's underneath doesn't match the fairy tale. And when the dust finally settles from all of this, whenever that happens, the family will never be the same. The institution will have to face how someone from those circles made it all the way to the balcony. The public will have questions about what was known and when. And Harry will have to live with the choices he made, the relatives he cut off, and the warnings he ignored. Because the first chapter of Meghan's downfall is being written right now by the man she thought she'd gotten past, the man she turned her back on, the man with nothing left to lose and every reason to tell his version of what happened. And once he starts talking, there's no putting any of this back in the box.
The space for grace. Giving yourself a minute until you feel clear and you feel confident is key.
So what do you think? Is Andrew really going to break his silence, or is this just another royal standoff that fades away? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more stories like this, the kind that dig into what's really happening behind the headlines, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching.